Hello, I'm Emilie, the Executive Director of Program Support Family Child Care Network and the founder of the Flourishing Preschool, a preschool that combines the Pickler approach and positive psychology to create the best outcomes for children 0 to 3. Today I'm going to talk about what caregivers are doing when they look like they are doing nothing, when they're not busying themselves with something. I'm going to talk about what the caregiver is doing when they are observing children. Emilie Pickler, the founder of the Pickler approach, which is an early childhood approach for developing healthy personalities in children birth to 3, considered observation to be one of the most important tasks in implementing her approach. In 1938, she wrote, "What is most important is to observe and get to know the child." The Pickler approach is grounded in knowing each individual child as a unique person. Through observing the child, we see their uniqueness. So please subscribe, please follow us, please like this video to learn how you can transform the world of care for babies with us, because this stuff is transformational. Let's start with observation. Observation in general is taking into account the other person's signals. Anna Tardos, Emilie Pickler's daughter, who is 90, and I've met her several times in Budapest, taught us the importance of observing the child's activities. What a child freely chooses to do tells us about them. It tells us about their developmental level, their interests, their personalities. This is because young people participate in the play activities with their whole personality. Their entire being is included. So their activities, what they do, are the windows into who they are. By observing, we can conclude what the child is able to do, what draws their interest, and perhaps we can even decipher what it is that's on the child's mind. For observation to be meaningful, the caregiver has to have an honest, genuine interest in the child. You can't fake it till you make it. You really have to watch the child and learn everything. True observation means we trust in the child's intentions. We trust that the child is communicating something about themselves, their needs, their reactions to the world around them. In the Pickler approach, we are not just observing with our eyes. We are thinking and imagining ourselves in the children's situation and identifying with them. We stand back to see what the child is doing, recognizing that the child has their own agenda. And that's very, very important to understand, to accept, to detach ourselves enough to appreciate that the child has their own agenda that's completely separate from ours. Observing is letting. We are letting the child show us what they can do, letting the child show us what they're interested in, letting the child show themselves to us through their own activity, interest, and engagement. This letting through observation creates a pause. Observation allows us to be calm, be present, and slow down. The process of observation causes the provider to stop for a moment. When observation is a habitual part of your process, it causes an automatic pause. There is pleasure that comes from this type of observing. It's a new form of pleasure. In the beginning, we might experience this as being a loss, of not being able to play with the children. We just sit there and watch. But over time, it will give us pleasure to see the child's development and know that that development came from our work. It's very satisfying. Although observation might seem like nothing, we use what we observe to inform what we do as the caregiver. Observation allows us to change our practice and the environment to meet the needs of the child. Observation allows the provider to develop a language about the child based on what they see. Observation allows the provider, the caregiver, to always be doing something. During the care situation, observation helps the dance, the interaction, creating a flow between the caregiver and the child. An example, you observe the child while eating and you adjust their feeding based on what you observe. Are they showing you they're full? So you stop feeding them. Are they showing you they're still hungry? You continue to feed them. You observe how they are eating. You don't just stuff the food in their mouth. It's an interaction. And the observation allows for that interaction to happen. Even in free play, the observation helps facilitate the child's play, noticing what they are interested in and making those types of materials more available. We observe all of these things, what they're interested in, how they feel about the things around them, how they feel about how we are interacting with them, what are the signals they're giving us. We observe all of these things. Observing the child's rhythm is another aspect of observation. Rhythm is the predictable flow of action. Each child has their own rhythm. We get to know a child's rhythm by observing them. Children have an individual rhythm of motor development. When they are at the place to be able to stand, they stand. Every child has a rhythm of arriving at the daycare. Some dive right in. Others want to stand at the door and look around. Rhythm is very important to pay attention to. Observation plays an important role in helping the child understand themselves. Through the speaking of the observations, the small child can learn about themselves. An example is, the caregiver might say, "I can see you are smiling when you see your friend. Your friend makes you happy." We're telling the child something about themselves. They're learning about themselves. Observation makes it possible for me to verbalize what the child is experiencing. We do this verbalizing in the moment, right when it is happening, so the child understands what they are doing. An example of this type of verbalizing might be, "I see you put one block on another so carefully to make them balance." So the child learns, I'm balancing things. We can also use what we observe to give feedback in a more general sense. An example of that might be making a statement like, "I know you like this food," or "The other day you were putting those cards one in front of the other." In that way, we write the child's history with our words, but it's all based on what we see, what we observed about that child. Using words to reflect the child, it helps them know themselves. There is a process called mentalizing, which is when the adult reads the thoughts in the child's mind and verbalizes it for them. And an example of that would be, "You are making a funny face because I know you don't like beans." Or, "You look very upset because the ball was taken from you." To observe infants and toddlers is more difficult. The entire life of the infant is one learning experience after another. If I experience something roll and it does roll, that's an experience. If I, expect something to roll, but there's something in its way and it stops, that's an experience. We have to pay concentrated attention to the details to understand what the infant is doing, where their eyes look, what are they doing with their hands. Like, those are all things to pay attention, which will give us a lot of information about that infant, what they're doing, what they're capable of doing. Observation allows true scaffolding. You can't help the child if you haven't paid attention to what they are capable of. Learning to observe children is a practice. It is a lifelong learning process. The observing attitude can be developed if you are around the right people and you and they have the right attitude. Observation skills can be developed. There is a reflective component to observing. Observation helps us recognize and be aware of our own feelings. You can think about how it makes you feel when you observe a child. Whenever I go into a program, whenever I'm observing groups of children, I always just feel first. I always want to feel, what is the emotional climate here? This is very important to be aware of ourselves, because we don't want to mix up our feelings and project them on the child. Sharing observations is important. Caregivers have to share their observations with their supervisors, their co-workers, and very important families. When we share observations with the families, we can help the child experience their existence as a continuous existence, because sharing the observations with the families allow them to talk about the child's day with them. This is especially important when the child's experience is broken up in pieces, when they don't come from a stable home. Sharing observation builds up a positive, continuous image of the child. And we hold that image and we can give it to them as a gift. Observation is the core of developing individualized care. The main thing is that you take what the child does seriously. It's important that each child be taken care of in a way that's good for them. In order to take care of a child in a way that's good for them, we have to get to know the child. The Pickler approach is grounded in knowing each individual child as a unique person. Observing is the key. Children show us themselves. We just have to pay attention.